Intellectual property, the samurai way. I hope I've pronounced it well. Samurai. The samurai was an old, ancient order in the Japanese culture of men who were dedicated to save the life of the emperor, the weak, the poor, and the territory at large. And if there is something that an entrepreneur can actually learn from the samurai life, the samurai way of life, is what we are referring to as the samurai way. Intellectual property, the samurai way. Intellectual property is the only form of resource that plays two distinct roles at any given moment. Intellectual property has what is called the defensive role. This is the role that protects your brand. This is the role that protects your product. This is the role that you assume whenever you refer to intellectual property, protecting something, securing something. That role is known as the defensive role. On the other hand, intellectual property similarly has an offensive role to it. That intellectual property can go to war on your behalf. That intellectual property can be something that will be proactive to you. The challenge that we have faced with entrepreneurship is majority of us, we assume the reactive component of intellectual property, the defensive component of intellectual property. And so in this class, I wish to introduce to us the offensive side of intellectual property, and we wish to learn from the samurai and how the samurai led their lives, how the samurai conducted themselves. And so the learning objective from this class, a student should be able to familiarize themselves with the duality of intellectual property. What we had said, that at any given time, your intellectual property is both adversarial as well as defensive. That intellectual property can go on the offensive for you. Secondly, this class is meant to awaken the combative component and features of your business and individuality. Intellectual property, whether it is the intellectual property on your person or the intellectual property on the face value of your business, intellectual property can be combative. And I think up to this point, it is fair enough to admit that business is combat. Entrepreneurship is combat. And so if an individual wishes to particularly appear at the marketplace, and if you wish to secure your space, then you need to have consideration at some point that business is combative, and at some point or another, I will need to go to war with my competition. That is the second learning objective. The third learning objective is that this class is meant to sensitize you to begin to identify your immediate competition. As an entrepreneur, who is your immediate competition? As an entrepreneur and as a business owner, who is your immediate threat? As an individual, at all times, we should have that, regardless of the marketplaces in which you appear. You need to constantly be aware that these are my immediate threats. And this is a question. In your business career as at now, whom would you regard to be your immediate threat? And are you aware of that thing about them that threatens the survival or threatens the prospects of your business, threatens the prospects of your product? And so at any given time, one needs to be constantly be aware. And so if you're saying that this organization is my immediate threat, As an individual, similarly, you need to understand what is that component that is threat to your business. What is that component about their business processes that is an immediate threat to you? It is not only sufficient to say that that is my competition, that is my threat. You must equally single out that component that threats your survival, that component that threatens your survival. This class, this is another learning objective. This class seeks to demonstrate similarity between the samurai life, discipline, and entrepreneurship. And that is one thing that I want us to take very keenly, that we can learn from other people. There is this phrase that is said that all truth is parallel. If there is a truth in one thing, you can learn from that truth and transfer it in your circumstance, and that truth will work equally in your circumstance. That is what it's called. All truth is parallel. And so there is a very thin line of similarity between the adversarial nature of the samurai order and entrepreneurship. It's only a naive person who goes into entrepreneurship not imagining that entrepreneurship is warfare. Entrepreneurship is a battlefield. And I want you to know that any person whom you consider as your competition, they don't have the best intention to you or for you. They don't think of you like, no, we can all coexist. There is nothing as coexistence in entrepreneurship. And the sooner you make peace with that, the better. And so let's go to what are those things that we can learn from the samurai way. And we have said that the samurai way was a very strict way that they led their lives. A samurai way was a very strict philosophy that a samurai, once an individual was admitted to this order, someone had to have an awareness. Someone had to have a thought pattern that was different from the ones we would call the civilians. And it is similarly with entrepreneurship. The moment someone has cut their teeth that this is my line of entrepreneurial venture, you need to upgrade the pedigree of your thought patterns. You need to upgrade the pedigree, your thought patterns, and know that this is adversarial in nature. And so this is one of the lessons that an entrepreneur should actually learn from the samurai. 1, constantly retain vigilance even in success, or what seemingly appears as success. For your enemy can easily strike you down while your arms are raised in celebration. And it's a very unique thing that we get from the samurai, that these people were not known for unnecessary celebration. A samurai's celebration is this: I am still alive. And even in entrepreneurship, some successes need just to be celebrated in 2 seconds and you move on. Because a success that an entrepreneur experiences can be his greatest downfall, because your success can get to your head. Your success can occupy your original zest, your original thirst for entrepreneurship. And so what we can learn from the samurais, and because intellectual property makes you to succeed where other people fail, because no two people share the same intellectual property. Even if they are in the same space, no two musicians share the same intellectual property. They could be in the same genre, no two musicians share the same intellectual property. No two architects share the same intellectual property. And so if there is something that all of us need to appreciate, that the uniqueness of your intellectual property has already guaranteed your success. And so in that awareness, it's important sometimes even to postpone celebration. Sometimes it's important, of course I understand, that sometimes we need to stop and enjoy the moment, but don't take a lot of time enjoying the moment. What we can learn is always retain vigilance. Retain vigilance in your product processes and who can be infiltrating your product development processes. Retain vigilance on your ecosystems that you've set up as an entrepreneur and who can infiltrate that ecosystem. It's important for an entrepreneur to be aware that the very moment you have set out to entrepreneurship, that very moment you have put in place an ecosystem. That ecosystem will constantly be at the risk of being infiltrated by external aggression, your competition. And that's very important. The other one, which all of us should actually learn from, is a samurai makes decision within 7 breaths. Over deliberation weakens judgment. Now, this is the question to you as an entrepreneur. Have you strengthened your decision-making muscle? One of the most rare skills at the marketplace is the ability to constantly arrive at sound decisions. That is something that is very rare. Whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you're someone in vocation, whether you're someone in freelance, whether you're someone in direct employment, the ability to take the shortest time and to arrive at decisions. One of the ways that I've always told people, if you have ever been approached or you're faced with an instance of arriving at a decision, the fastest way to arrive at a decision is one: what are the worst case scenario? So in any time that you are approached with a decision to make, always constantly arrive at what are the worst case scenario. Because if you can survive the worst case scenario, then guess what? You can arrive at a decision in the shortest time possible. According to the samurai order, a samurai arrives at a decision with 7 breaths. That is how long? It doesn't even take 30 seconds. And a samurai has arrived at a decision. Because the greatest decision a samurai made is death. That death might come today. That death might come tomorrow. That death might come next week. That death might come next month. That death might be occasioned through the hand of my enemy, or that death might be occasioned through my own hand. And so a samurai is constantly having that awareness. So let me ask you, if you've already made peace with death, what other decision is harder to make? And that is why even in entrepreneurship, as you go about your venture, the question is always one: I have made peace that I can go bankrupt at any time. I have made peace that I can receive this from the tax agencies at any time. I have made this choice, this decision. I've already made peace with that. So the worst that can happen is, can you look at what are the worst possible scenarios? In any time you're approached with a decision, always ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario in this instance? What's the worst that can happen? That one will limit for you time. The thing that majority of us don't seem to understand is the longer you deliberate, the longer you squander time, the longer you squander opportunity. If there is something that is quite unforgiving in the marketplace, is it time? Time is quite unforgiving. Opportunity, similarly, is quite unforgiving. Actually, they tell us that opportunity only comes once in a lifetime. And so that is something that as an entrepreneur, we really need to start factoring. What is my decision-making muscle? Have I perfected it daily? And that is something that you can equally give to your children. That is something that you can equally give to your partner, your life partners, your busy entrepreneurial partners. That is something that we can constantly help people around us to develop decision-making muscles. And that is very important. The third thing that an entrepreneur should actually live by, which is from the samurai way of life, is a samurai lives with singularity of purpose. Singularity of purpose. In entrepreneurship, the purpose is only one, that I chose to be in this thing. It either has to happen or it has to happen. Singularity of purpose helps us to limit unnecessary distraction. One of those ancient writings that we get is that a double-minded person is unstable. Whether you are an entrepreneur, if you're double-minded, you're quite unstable. In a family setup, if you are double-minded, you're quite unstable. And so as an entrepreneurship, your first formidable strength is, do you have singularity of purpose? Do you have singularity of objective? Do you have singularity of intent in everything that you do? Intellectual property is a resource. And intellectual property, in whichever side that you approach it from, whether adversarial or the defensive side, intellectual property helps you as an individual to have that singularity of purpose. Because to an individual who bears intellectual property, the purpose is this: can I develop a market from my intellectual property? Can I develop points of transaction on my intellectual property? Can I develop market ecosystems from my intellectual property? That is the most valuable thing when it comes to intellectual property. What are you after? In intellectual property, you're after setting up markets. You're after setting up economies. That is what Coca-Cola does. Coca-Cola has created an entire industry simply from their formula. KFC has created an entire economy, an entire franchise, singularly from the KFC recipe, the KFC formula, how they go about preparing their meal. J.K. Rowling, that lady who wrote Harry Potter, the lady has created an entire empire, the Harry Potter empire, singularly from a story about a wizard boy. Intellectual property helps the bearer to constantly have this singularity of mind. And that is the greatest one of the greatest learning that we can get from the samurai. A samurai lives with singularity of purpose. To a samurai, the singularity of purpose is this: my life is to protect the emperor. My life is to protect the emperor. What is the life of your product? What is the life of your brand? What is it after? What is the life of your value proposition, your innovation, that which you're bringing to the marketplace? Does it have one singularity of intent, one singularity of objectivity, one singularity of purpose? And that is one of those important things that you as an entrepreneur need to arrive at. Every single moving piece of your business can donate singularity of objectivity. You can marshal all your intellectual property and you can align them on one purpose. And that is something very important. The fourth thing that we can learn from the samurai way is that once a task has been set, surrender yourself wholeheartedly to its implementation. Act without hesitation or fear of consequence. In intellectual property, there is no room for doubt. Of course, there are those instances of constantly evaluating, constantly assessing. But once you have arrived at a choice, once you have arrived at a task, in this space in my career, this is what I am after. In this space in my life, this is what I am after. Once an individual in entrepreneurship has arrived at that, then there is no room to have double duality of intent in your heart. So a samurai knows that if we are going to attack, there is nothing else than that attacking. So the only thing that will stop me from attacking is not even sickness. It's not even illness. And it's an amazing thing, particularly if you look at the dramatic expression of a samurai and how a samurai would even cut their own finger, right? Just for what they believe in. So as an entrepreneur, this is what I would want us to start, that from today, do you have a dedicated line of a dedicated line of tasks? Have you identified those things that you have put that in this space in my career, this is what I want to do? In this space in my entrepreneurial venture, this is what I wish to do. That is something that is quite valuable to an entrepreneur, to have tasks. And if you have set tasks, go ahead and perform your task. It's something very important. We are having people who set goals and they don't reach out for goals. One of those things that people usually make at the end of every year, an individual will come up with resolutions. This is my New Year resolutions. New Year resolutions don't last more than 2 weeks. Usually they don't last more than 2 weeks. Can you just imagine what manner of an entrepreneur you could be if every task you set for yourself, you could go out there and explore every way to tackle it? One good thing is, once you have set out a task, intellectual property similarly has a role to play as a resource. Intellectual property is a resource that can help you tackle all your tasks. And that's something very valuable. The fifth way of samurai is, a samurai cannot reach the heights of greatness unless they have had 7 major failures. To an entrepreneur, like I just started by telling us earlier, the greatest fear to an entrepreneur is one day being pronounced bankrupt. That is the greatest fear to an entrepreneur. And once you've made that fear, what's the other fear? That maybe I will die. That's the second fear, right? And once you have made peace with that, I will die one day. What's the another fear? People around me dying. And once you have arrived at people around me will die one day, then you start to appreciate every moment. When you go to your business, you appreciate every moment, because I want to develop this product to the best of my abilities, because I might die after having completed this product. I want to go out there and I want to, the best of my abilities, negotiate with my suppliers, with people within my ecosystem. I would want to go out there and to the best of my abilities. And so a samurai knows that once I have set peace with, this is the worst case scenario in my entrepreneurship, this is the worst case scenario in my life, then once you have made peace with what can go wrong, I have no control over what can go wrong. The only thing I have control of is I can control my energy and to what directions I channel that attention, what direction I will channel my creative attention, what direction I will channel my creative output. That is very important, because majority of us, what makes us to deviate from our path are fears, and how fear sometimes seemingly appears. And that is very important to an entrepreneur. And this is something that I wish to identify. It's one of those amazing things that no samurai ever goes by their real name. A samurai is always called the samurai of this order. The samurai, right? Because sometimes the order, the agenda, the mandate is bigger than an individual success. The mandate, the credibility, the agenda sometimes, it's bigger than an individual. It is bigger than an individual. And what we can get from that, particularly as entrepreneurs, similarly, is that as an entrepreneur, how do you call your venture? Do you call your business in a way that this business, the name you give that business, can tell us sustainability from that business? The name you call your product, do you give it an angle that this product can outlive me? Because the samurai order, the individual who makes up that body of brotherhood, that individual is important. But what is even more important is the collective brotherhood, what we are doing together. And as an entrepreneur, your greatest interest should be that I would want one day my company to outlive me. I would want one day my company to transcend borders, to transcend geographical boundaries, that my product can transcend religious creeds, religious persuasions. My product can transcend. That is very important. And that one starts even by how you name your business. How do you name your products? How do you name your product development processes? How do you attach meaning? Where do you attach value to an entrepreneur? Because to an entrepreneur, if we are to take that life lessons from a samurai, then the number one interest of an entrepreneur is this company will outlive me, and I would wish to give this company to 1,000 generations after me. I would wish to leave this business, I would wish to leave this company to 1,000 generations after me. The last one, and this is the final way of life of a samurai, is that work to surpass others. A samurai does not settle to be amongst great warriors. Seek to be the best. And in our day and in our time, the phrase be the best has taken that cliche nuance to it, that I am the best. A samurai has only one intent. I want to be better than my master. Everyone else comes second. I want to receive the commendation from my master. In entrepreneurship, your master could be your client. Your master could be your shareholders. Your master could be the ecosystems in which you operate. Your master could be the people that you work with. Your master could be the people that you serve. Your master is your product, your business. And at any given moment, the number one role for every entrepreneur is constantly to work to surpass that which others have done. In intellectual property, work is a very sacred part of intellectual property. Because in intellectual property, we say if an individual can exert work, then that individual legitimately deserves to be rewarded. So there is a component of intellectual property that actually admits the place for work. There is a component of intellectual property that actually encourages and advocates for work. Similarly, there is a component of intellectual property that at any given time, you are legitimately deserving to be rewarded if you can show that you're working. So intellectual property is a form of work. When you're developing a product, that is work. When you're developing your business strategies, that is a form of work. When you're developing your next course of actions, when you're developing your next ways of, this is the point whereby we are going to diversify. At this, that is work. Intellectual property is work. And if you can work, and if you are just aware to understand that you are working in a way that no one else can ever compete. Because we have said that no two intellectual property are the same. No two intellectual property are the same. So that means if an individual, if an organization can give themselves to their work, if an organization can give themselves to their craft, can give themselves to their development of value, they can give themselves to the development of their value proposition, then that is one of the most valuable things any entrepreneur can do. And out of those is how an entrepreneur can mirror the strict discipline of a samurai in entrepreneurship. Because when it's all said and done, entrepreneurship is warfare. Entrepreneurship is battle. Your competition is constantly exploring ways of getting you out of business. Getting you out of business. Some of them will undercut you through pricing models. Some of them will undercut you through how the rate at which they're providing services. So there are 10 million variables at how your competition will constantly be coming at you. And so as an entrepreneur, you need to be vigilant. Just in summation, let me define intellectual property just for the sake of those who are interacting with me for the very first time. Intellectual property is anything that you can create from your mind, which you as an individual can actually commercialize. That means whatsoever has come from your mind, if it's a song, it is not intellectual property until a market has gone out of it. If you are a painter and you have painted something, that thing might have copyright, but it's not regarded as intellectual property until a market has emerged out of it. If you are a designer, a fashion designer, or even an industrial designer, that thing might have what it's called an industrial design, but it is not intellectual property until you've grown a market around it. You can come up with a formula, you can come up with a process, and you can even show me, Mr. Guang, I have a latest patent. That latest patent does not confer intellectual property on what you have registered. It is only intellectual property when a market has emerged out of it. My name is Ogwang. Thank you so much. And if you found this video valuable to you, if you found that these are the type of conversations you would wish to hear more often, I would ask you to kindly consider subscribing. Like this video, consider sharing it with your friends, and don't even and you can actually even leave us a comment, and I will interact with you in the comment section. My name is Ogwang, and thank you so much. I will see you in the next video.